An old man called John Kramer is suffering from brain cancer, so he spends most of his days getting tested or attending meetings with his cancer support group. No matter how many times he gets tested, though, the result is always the same. He only has a year left, perhaps only a few months. The doctor advises John to retire, but John takes it as being told to die easily. After leaving the doctor's office, John stops at the water fountain only to notice the custodian is about to steal from a patient with a broken hand. All of a sudden, the custodian wakes up tied to a chair with a weird contraption attached to his face and hands. A deep voice announces they're about to play a game. It turns out John is the infamous murderer known as Jigsaw, who puts people who have sinned in traps to punish them but also to test their will to live. The custodian must turn the control dial up 5 levels in 60 seconds or a vacuum will suck his eyeballs out. The clock immediately starts ticking and the custodian turns the dial, only to discover that each turn breaks one of his fingers. The pain is unbearable, but the man keeps going, breaking finger by finger while screaming. Unfortunately, he doesn't make it on time and the vacuum sucks his eyes out as promised. However, the scene changes and it's revealed John had been imagining it all, and the custodian is putting the objects back in their place. 4 months later, John is getting his will ready at a cafe when he sees Henry from his support group. It turns out his cancer has been cured by an experimental treatment that combines a new medicine and a procedure, from which Henry has a big scar. The treatment isn't available in the USA because it hasn't been approved by the government and the doctor is escaping from the big pharma mafia, but Henry gives John a website where he can research the subject. When John goes home, he looks at various interviews with the doctor online, then enters the website Henry gave him and finds a video from the doctor's daughter Cecilia. She explains her father has gone into hiding, but she's still carrying on his work. John sends her a message and soon gets a call from her offering him to come to Mexico so he can start the treatment. A few days later, John arrives in Mexico and is received by taxi driver Diego, who shows him around the popular tourist sites before leaving the city to reach the rural area. Suddenly a van blocks the road and a few masked men with guns come out to threaten John until he tells them his name. Once they're sure he's the right guy, they get him in the van and take him to the secret facility where he's welcomed by housekeeper Gabriela. After he settles down, John meets Cecilia, who explains the van is just part of their security to keep Big Pharma away. She shows him around the place and John gets to meet the caretaker's son Carlos, anesthesiologist Mateo, nurse Valentina, and another patient called Parker, who just finished his own treatment and wishes John good luck. Valentina proceeds to take some blood from John and runs other routine tests. Afterward, Cecilia and John discuss the details of the treatment and Cecilia wonders what John does for a living, but John just says he went from engineer to helping people overcome inner obstacles. Later in the middle of the night, John hears a noise outside and finds Carlos trying to fix his bicycle but not doing it well. John immediately helps him and during their conversation, he gets to learn the Spanish word for pull. The next day, John finally goes through the surgery. Because they'll be operating on his brain, they'll do something called awake craniotomy, which means John will be floating in and out of consciousness so the doctors can be sure they aren't messing with his brain. During the procedure, he wakes up and they ask him to wiggle his fingers, which he does successfully. Before he falls unconscious again, John gets a look at a screen and sees the recording of his own brain with the tumor. A few hours later, John wakes up in a new facility, which is closer to a hospital in case he needed a transfusion. Cecilia confirms the operation went extremely well and now John only has to drink the special medicine for a week, and John is so happy that he cries as he promises to send the second half of the payment in the morning. During the following days, John feels at peace and tries to enjoy life again. When he finds himself designing new traps, he tears the page off his notebook, wanting to leave that behind him. He's so grateful to have a new beginning that he buys a gift for the team, then he uses his skills to inspect the landmarks and track down the location of the house. However, when he gets there he's shocked to find the door open and things broken on the floor. John looks further inside but there's nobody around, and when he enters the operation room, it's in shambles as well. On a table, he finds a DVD called Surgeons of Tomorrow and when he watches it, he discovers the recording of what he thought had been his brain. Seeing where this is going, John takes off his bandages and looks at the mirror to confirm his suspicions. He never was operated on, this whole thing had been a scam. Furious, he breaks the gift bottle he bought and starts planning his revenge. Sometime later, Diego is dropping off his latest passenger when suddenly, someone surprises him from behind and puts him to sleep. When he wakes up, he finds himself tied to a column in the facility, and his hands are wrapped in tape with scalpels at the end and 2 bombs strapped to his arms. Terrified, he immediately cuts off the rope and sees John behind the window, but John doesn't talk to him. Instead, he throws a recorder with the rules of the game. John knows Diego had been pretending to be the surgeon, so now he'll have to operate on himself. He must use the scalpels to remove the bombs before they explode. The scalpels aren't strong enough to cut the steel wires, so the skin they're attached to must be slashed instead. At first Diego is desperate enough to try to find a way out, but since there's no exit, he starts using the scalpels. It's incredibly painful and he can't stop groaning in pain, but after lots of effort and bleeding, he manages to remove both bombs and jumps out of the way right before they explode. Afterward, John helps Diego with some emergency care and promises he'll be fine. He also calls a detective friend of his to help him track down the rest of the scam team. A few days later, Valentina is at a pub and gets a guy to spend the night with. However, when they get to the car and she asks for money, he gets offended when he realizes this is her job and pushes her into his car to take her by force. However, before he can do anything, someone reaches through the window and kills the guy. Then Valentina gets kidnapped. Meanwhile, Gabriella goes to the vet clinic where Matteo works and buys some animal medicine from him because she's an addict. After she leaves, Matteo hears a noise, and when he goes to check, someone surprises him and knocks him out. Back to Gabriella, she goes to a bar to have the medicine in a bathroom stall and notices a pair of mysterious feet wandering around. She tries to sneak out quietly, but the mysterious person wearing a creepy mask knocks her down to kidnap her too. In a luxurious mansion, Cecilia is getting the bags with money ready to leave while arranging a meeting with her next victim in Bolivia. When she hears a noise, she checks her security cameras and sees a person on the roof. This person suddenly breaks the glass ceiling, so Cecilia runs to try to escape in her car, but when she opens the garage she finds a person with a creepy mask blocking the way. Suddenly John appears behind her and puts her to sleep to kidnap her as well. The other person removes her mask and reveals to be Amanda, the only victim of John's that has survived his traps. She used to be an addict, but after John gave her his deadly treatment, she turned her life around and now she's so grateful to him that she helps him carry out his plans. A few hours later, all the scammers wake up in the facility with chains that stop them from trying to escape. Amanda takes Cecilia's jacket and phone and leaves them on a table before John comes out to call everyone out for their scam. Cecilia tries to say they do help people and that John's case was different, but John doesn't believe her because he's already investigated all of them. All her patients are dead and she's rich because of it. Then it's time for the first game, which involves Valentina, whose head is trapped with rope and thick wires. She tries to move them away from her neck, but that only hurts her hands. John leaves her a box with a wire saw, explaining her leg must go so she can transfer a sample of bone marrow to a machine that will deactivate the saw around her neck. At first Valentina is too scared to act, but the others urge her on and convince her she must survive. Valentina starts to cut as she screams in pain, slowing down at the bone but never giving up. With only 45 seconds left, the leg falls off and Valentina immediately connects the hose to do the transfer, however it's not fast enough and time runs out. The saw quickly activates and Valentina loses her head. John and Amanda are watching all this on a screen in an office, and once Valentina is dead, John announces Gabriella is next. Amanda feels bad for Gabriella because she understands how addicts sometimes just get sucked into things, but John points out everyone has free will, so Amanda needs to get used to it. It's then revealed that John wants Amanda to take over his work after he dies. At that moment Cecilia's phone starts ringing and the group tries to reach it, but the chains aren't long enough. A desperate Cecilia grabs a piece of metal and uses it to open Valentina's stomach. This way she can remove her intestines to use them as a rope. The plan works and she manages to bring the table closer, but as soon as she dials a number on her phone, Amanda shows up and tases her before taking the phone away. Afterward Amanda sees a person on the security camera entering the facility. It's Parker and he's brought a gun because he was scammed too and he wants his money back. He makes his way inside and finds a person with the creepy mask, but when he shoots, the person falls because it's just Valentina's body. Amanda uses this distraction to hit him and knock him out. When Parker wakes up minutes later, he's tied to a chair and Amanda has his gun. He shows John that the scar they gave him was fake, so in return John shows him they've captured the scammers and are punishing them, but Parker thinks they're taking things too far. Now it's time for the next game, but instead of doing Gabriella like John asks, Amanda prepares Matteo instead. While tasing him to unconsciousness, Amanda tells Gabriella to behave so she can help her later. When Matteo wakes up, he's chained to a chair with a strange contraption and a camera, and the jigsaw puppet shows up with some surgery tools and instructions. The collar shocks Matteo while he listens to the recording. He must put a piece of brain tissue into a glass with enzymes, which will dissolve the tissue and open a machine door with the key for Matteo to free himself. All this must be done in 3 minutes. At first Matteo refuses to play, but the collar shocks him again and Cecilia reminds him he may end up like Valentina. Matteo grabs the drill and screams in pain as he cuts open a spot, then he uses some tweezers to take a sample of his brain and put it in the glass. Unfortunately there are only 22 seconds left and the liquid doesn't dissolve the sample fast enough, so the trap activates and kills Matteo by closing around his head, forming a traditional Mexican mask. Parker still thinks this is very sick, but the duo ignores him. Amanda wonders if Cecilia couldn't connect them to her father, but John wants to finish this so Amanda can learn and carry on his legacy. Crying, Amanda hugs John, and he tells her to release Parker to see if he'll be on their side. At that moment the jigsaw doll appears before Gabriella, but she grabs the recorder and throws it away before it can play the instructions. John uses the speakers to explain the rules to her anyway as he activates a machine that hangs her from a ceiling with a chain connected to her arm while a second chain connects her leg to the floor. Both limbs must be amputated or a radiation machine will burn her down. While suffering from the unbearable radiation heat, Gabriella uses the tool they left for her and after a few painful hits, she manages to release her leg. Her body swings to the side, charred but still alive. However, the machine just turns to keep on burning her. Gabriella doesn't give up and starts working on her arm next, hitting until she's finally free and falls to the floor. John immediately tells Amanda to take Gabriella to the hospital, but suddenly Parker retrieves his gun and asks the duo for the chain's keys. Then they leave the office and Parker reunites with Cecilia as the truth is revealed. He's been working with her all along and they're a couple. After he frees her, Cecilia hits Amanda and they make John chain himself to the trap designed for Cecilia. John wants Gabriella to be treated because she won, however Cecilia just steps on her neck to kill her. While they chained up Amanda too, Cecilia says she doesn't think any of the other scammers were her friends. In fact, she's happy that she doesn't have to pay them now. John and Amanda tell Parker that Cecilia will betray him too, but he doesn't believe them. Suddenly they hear a noise outside. It's Carlos playing with his soccer ball, which gives Cecilia an idea to hurt John back. She brings Carlos inside and puts him with John in the trap, so when she gets close enough, John tries to attack her. However, he has to let go when Parker threatens to kill Carlos. Then the trap finally activates, so John uses the Spanish he learned to tell Carlos not to pull the lever. The machine starts throwing blood on their faces to drown them, but John pulls his lever to make the table lean back so blood only falls on him and Carlos is safe. However, Carlos wants to help his friend and pulls his lever anyway, bringing the blood back to him. John has to make an extra effort to pull his lever again and keep it down to save Carlos. While those two try to survive in the machine, Parker and Cecilia go into the office to retrieve their money. As they look around, Parker wonders something. If that trap was supposed to be for Cecilia, then who would have been on the table with her? At that moment Cecilia finds the bag with their money and when she moves it, she reveals a clock, the lights change color, and the door locks itself. There's also no money in the bag and no bullets in the gun. Downstairs, Amanda and John easily remove the chains and stop the table, saving Carlos without issues. It turns out this has been their plan all along and the office is the actual final trap. Diego had given John all the names of the scammers and Amanda managed to kidnap them all, but Parker was impossible to catch so they had to make a plan to attract him. They had left the phone near Cecilia on purpose so she would contact him and he could track the call. At that moment a recording starts playing with the instructions. They must work together to survive. A deadly chemical gas begins filling the room and burning their skin, but there's only one ventilation hole, so they must take turns to breathe. However, they prove they're both very selfish and start fighting over it instead. Just like John and Amanda predicted, Cecilia doesn't hesitate to kill Parker and then takes the hole for herself. Cecilia now has to watch how John gives all her money to Carlos, and the trio leaves the facility with her trapped inside. A few days later back in the USA, Henry wakes up in the bathroom from the first movie and finds himself chained to the ceiling. There's no surgery scar anymore because he had also been part of the scam, and now John is ready with a new trap for him. This time he's being helped by Detective Hoffman, who in the future will compete with Amanda to be John's heir. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.